Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about hatching. The last one was pencil shading, where we learned about what value was and how to create a smooth gradient of value. In hatching, we're going to set our box up the same way with 4 lines that separate it into 5 boxes, and we're going to number just like we did before, 1 through 5. And remember that 5 is our darkest and 1 is our lightest. Okay, so when we talk about hatching, we're talking about lines. Lines that overlap with each other to build up and create a value. Normally when we're talking about hatching, we're talking about diagonal lines. You will occasionally see them in up and down or side to side, but diagonal is a little more user-friendly, if you will. You can control it a little bit better because your hand has a natural slant to it. So just like we did in our pencil shading box, we're going to focus on box 3 first, and we're going to talk in percentages again, just like we did in pencil shading. So if 5 is our all the way dark, 100%, and 1 is our all the way light at 0%, 3 is our 50%. Okay, so when we're talking about lines, we're talking about the more lines you have, the darker it is, and the less lines, or the further they are spread apart, the lighter it is. So in box 3, we want to fill this about 50% of the way with diagonal lines, like so. Okay, you're going to eyeball it. You might have to adjust it later as we go through, but we'll talk about that then. And just like we did in pencil shading, because we will be building a darker value in box 4 and 5, we can continue the same 50% coverage in box 4 and 5, because we're going to build those up in a little bit. Okay? Now, you'll also notice that hatching, and when we get to cross hatching, it goes a little quicker than pencil shading because you're not as focused on a smooth gradient here as you were in pencil shading. Okay, so I have my 50% coverage in box 3, 4, and 5. My diagonal lines, you'll notice they're going in all the same direction. That's really important. You don't want to move them around, and you don't want them to crisscross right now, because that is what we're going to learn about in cross hatching. So just like before, in box number 2, we're going to talk about percentages. If 3 is 50% and 1 is 0, then box 2 is 25%. And again, like I did up here in pencil shading, I'm going to get rid of this line in between box 1 and 2 because I don't want anything interfering with my box 1 and the way that it's going to look. Okay, so I'm going to carry some of the lines over from box 3 into box 2, but I'm not going to carry all of them because, again, we're looking for 25% coverage here. So we don't want as many lines in box 2 as we have in box 3. Okay? And in box 1, we're just going to take a couple of lines from box 2 and just pull it past where that line would have been. Okay? So like I said, this one goes a lot quicker, so we're almost done. So now we go back down to box number 5, just like we did before with pencil shading. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this section in with lines that are as close together as I can possibly get them, and they may overlap on top of each other, but again, it's important that they all go in the same direction. And it's also important that at this point we don't just try and color this box in like we did for box 5 in the pencil shading, because we don't want to lose the effect of the lines because it gives us a visual texture. So I'm going to get my lines as close as I can, going in the same direction in box number 5, just like this. And again, the rectangle is just a containment. If you go outside of it a little bit, it's not a big deal. It's just to help us have enough space to do all of this on one page. Okay, so there is my 5 value. And you can see by continuing to make the lines, it has a visual texture. It's very fuzzy looking, or like fabric, like it has strands, like hair or something like that. And that is really something that you can use to your advantage if you're shading certain types of things, like if you're shading a fabric that has really pronounced lines, and you can hatch and make it look like more of a textured piece of fabric. Alright, now, just like before, we have 50% in box 3 and 100% in box 5. So that makes 4 75%. So we're going to, same direction, fill our lines in box number 4 until it's about 75% covered, which doesn't take us very long. Okay? So here you have 75%. You have a little bit of white space showing through, but not much. Now, we talked about in the pencil shading one that you need this smooth transition between each value. Here, we're not as focused on that because we're learning about how much coverage, but you can do a blending right here. You just increase some of those lines and bring them together if you want. Kind of like how we brought some over into box number 1. But you want them to be, again, in the same direction. And you can smooth that out, and that's like a half value. So if I were to say 4.5, it would be right here where box 4 and 5 meet. Okay? And that's hatching. That's really easy. Okay? Alright. We'll catch up in the next one.